in emerging markets, who do depend on emerging markets as for outsourcing. How many of you actually do some level of due diligence with an on-site visit before you start using or qualifying or getting those manufacturers under contract? And how many don't? Nobody wants to go up to it. You know, there's a lot of evidence, there's a lot of information, and I'll give you a website either later today or tomorrow. Don't trust what you read on the internet about your suppliers. Be very cautious and careful. Anybody can put anything they want on the internet, including glowing photographs of what your manufacturing facility may be. And reality is, if you ever do go to visit, would probably hesitate walking through the doors. It's really important that you do some level of due diligence. Probably more often than not, manufacturers do not do site visits in emerging countries, emerging world countries. It's too costly, it's too expensive, and if that's the case, just think, one has to question going forward, what kind of oversight are you going to do going forward? Should a problem arise? What kind of auditing are you going to do? Is it an out of sight, out of mind type of a situation? It is costly to do work, to do business in these kind of countries. Maybe you guys can speak to some of that experience.
It's frightening if you don't have the on-site presence. We rely heavily on the regional teams to do that due diligence, and they not only do the due diligence for the proposed supplier ads, but we have them spend 50+% of their time in the current factories in those regions for that very reason. That is, things are very fluid, high turnover rates. You're not sure who the quality manager is going to be from one day to the next, and those kind of things. So if you don't have your folks on the ground routinely in your supply base in the emerging markets, you'll probably pay the price at some point. So that's just from my perspective. Now it's not cheap. That's the whole point. So you have to make a decision. Is the market big enough? How big a supply base is it going to be? How many people do you need to actually provide that oversight and coverage and do the business case analysis? So it's not free. Well, if the piece part price may be cheaper or look cheaper, it usually is not in the long run.
I just wanted to add or expand on the one comment you made about turnover. Don't underestimate how high the turnover is in some of these companies. It's a cultural way of life, and sometimes the turnover can be as high as 50 and 60%, which ought to set off alarms in your mind at least that these companies have employees that are turning over, and how does that training stick and how does the culture stick? You really need to be very selective about where you're going to be placing your business when you're looking at emerging markets. I think we have a topic on this, so.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I think one's coming up, so.
Charles, do you have any experience with that?
We do suppliers in emerging markets, and we do have the same level of controls. We do audit them. We sometimes leverage off our facilities in Japan or Singapore to assist us from a cost standpoint or from a timing standpoint. That problem I mentioned before on the design control change, that happened right before Christmas, and I was lucky that someone from Singapore was willing to go there 2 days later, and I didn't have to go or send someone from America to China the week before Christmas to do this emergency audit of them. So we do use as much as possible on people closest to the region, even if we don't have someone immediately available.
Steve?
Yes.
Do you know of any of your clients, or I put this out to the entire audience, has there been a situation where the cost benefit just does not outweigh the risk? And is there a time where you'll look at, instead of continuing to purchase or source from Asia, that it just doesn't make sense, and you'll relook at a supplier that's domestic, that you have more controls over? And is there specific situations or situations that has happened?
I am aware of firms who, while as Rita said, and Mike said, the initial per unit cost seems real cheap, but once you weigh in the cost of oversight, potential liabilities, and actually going through one of these recalls or one of these situations as a result of not providing oversight or the change controls that you weren't aware of, have pulled back and have begun outsourcing domestically. The risks were just too great for these particular clients, and they felt they didn't have the control. That being said, some of them have been reconsidered, that they would consider going into emerging markets as long as the supplier in the emerging market also had a U.S. presence, or they now had a presence in that emerging market so that they could provide that routine oversight and reduce some of that liability. Anybody else have experience? I don't know if anybody else is aware of what's had that.
I wasn't going to talk too much to that last question. I was just going to say about building relationships can't be underestimated either. I mean, all company or suppliers, they have their systems, they have their processes, and they have their business aspects too. But it's all about compensation where you can't get what you need, and you try to compensate the best you can. Whether I think we saw a balance earlier that one of Kim's presentations, if you have the systems real strong, then maybe you don't need all this inspection. If the system's not real strong, then you start throwing in all those things, okay? But one of the key things I've noticed, and I deal with a lot of OEM suppliers, and a lot of times they're really small scale, if you can build a strong relationship with the quality lead, now granted, culturally, sometimes they change quick too, so you're kind of stuck. But building a good relationship with your supplier and building that partnership can mean a big difference in trying to get what you need. Even though it might not be a standard practice, if you build that relationship, it can help.
That's a very important message. Your suppliers have to understand your requirements, your expectations, your specifications. They need to know what you're building. They need to know how it's being used. They need to know what's the consequences of not building it correctly. That's all part of the relationship, and I agree with you. You can't minimize and say that enough. It's very critical.